For all the new people, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to do a little prayer of gratitude to start out today's webinar, and then I will do a minute or so recap and description of what is energy healing, and then we will dive into tonight's topic, which is establishing intimacy with your Celestial Healing Collective. So this should be lots of fun. We'll start with a prayer. Thank you to being. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything. For every individual point in creation being that great wholeness. Thank you to the ancestors and all family members, offspring, ancestors and offspring. Thank you to the divine in all of us for that totality or wholeness in all of us, for blessing our ability to work concisely and efficiently and profoundly in tonight's webinar, to promote maximum flow of wisdom, understanding, and healing for everyone participating today. Thank you with infinite gratitude, infinite. We cannot, words do not sufficiently describe to that aspect of being, of the totality of creation, which is responsible for the flow of wisdom, for the flow of knowledge, for the flow of understanding, that great eternal tradition of wisdom, that great holy tradition. Thank you. All right. So come on in. Hey, hi, have a seat.
How are you, darling?
There could even be more people coming. I don't know. I got emails that more were coming. So we could have some little bit of movement going on at our end over here, which is always nice. It's nice to be popular. All right. So what is energy healing? Energy healing is the process of focusing attention intelligently in order to produce specific effects. So attention or awareness is totality. It is the very essence of the stuff of which the source of creation is made. It is consciousness. It is awareness. It is perception. That consciousness is wholeness. And it focuses into wherever the pain is. So if there's suffering anywhere in the body or in the life or in the bank account or anywhere, then the attention goes there, because attention has the ability of activating fullness, re-establishes completion, totality. Focusing attention's easy. We've been doing it ever since we were this big, maybe even this big. Been focusing our attention. So it comes naturally. However, what people are experiencing today is they fall sick and they don't know why they fall sick necessarily, exactly, like they don't know exactly what's the cause. And sometimes they have symptoms, but they don't know what's behind the symptoms. Like something hurts, but what's exactly causing that? And then when they find out that there's some dysfunction in some part of the body, then the question is, but how do I make that dysfunction better? How do I make myself functional again? So going into that area, if we want to put our attention, because enliven the area of healing itself, the premise is to go to the point in one's own field of consciousness that has the wisdom, capability, understanding, and resource to heal the body, because everybody knows that the body heals itself if you give it a chance, if the body gets sufficient rest, or the conditions are right. If the conditions are right. And I love to quote Dr. Lissa Rankin, who said that she discovered that there were over 35,000 recorded cases in the Library of Congress in the USA of individuals healing themselves of literally every known disease known to man through the placebo effect, which means that the body does have the ability to heal itself. So what we're going to look into today is those fine mechanics of how that happens. Now, in previous webinars, I've laid out a big map of the ocean of consciousness. If we take as a founding premise that consciousness has the potential and ability to heal the body, then the question is, okay, so we need to work with consciousness. But the thing about consciousness is it's an infinite ocean. So we're looking at a very big field, and how do we navigate our attention through this gigantic ocean of consciousness in order to get it settled on this precise spot, which will produce the effect of healing the body? So I've talked about y-axes and x-axes and different ways of cutting up that ocean. But today we're going to take a deep dive into the y-axis. So it's important to know whatever axis I make reference to begins and ends in fullness. It begins and ends in infinity. So the y-axis starts out with a field of infinite, unbounded ocean of consciousness. And that's not manifest. And it becomes slightly manifest, abstractly manifest, and then more manifest, and more manifest, and more concentrated, and more dense. And eventually we get up to the physical body, which is at this point of density. Now, of course, you can go past the physical body, right? Because you can go into a black hole and it becomes more dense and more dense and more dense. It becomes dense all the way down to the infinity of density. So you've got infinities at both ends. What's interesting about this is that even though the infinities seem like they should be different along all of the axes, because you've got from less concrete to more concrete, you've got from smaller than the smallest and bigger than the biggest, and you've got from absolutely horrible to absolutely wonderful and absolutely no awareness whatsoever to like full beaming awareness. So in all of these, you can say, well, those seem like opposites, and so it can't be the same infinity, but it is. It is. It's like a necklace, right? Do I dare take off my necklace? I'll never get it back on. But you get the idea that the necklace, you've got infinities at both ends, and they come together at the clasp. And when you bring them together at the clasp, then you have completed the cycle. You get wholeness, which is another way of describing infinity consciousness. All right. So we're working with infinities. I have arbitrarily divided this y-axis from very abstract to very concrete into 8 layers. And the deepest layers reside at the pre-manifest level. And that is where our celestial healing collective resides way down there before any manifestation occurs. Now, you guys should know that I usually take 3 weeks from the time I finish one webinar to the time I start the next one to really work with the topic of the upcoming webinar. And when this topic came up, I thought, oh, well, I've been working with this Celestial Healing Collective like ever since I started this work, and even before, all the way back when I was teaching meditation and so forth, for decades, so this should be a breeze. But it was very interesting that as I looked into it over the last 3 weeks, there was so much richness of information and value to uncover that it was even like it surprised me. So I'm very excited about today's webinar to share all this information with you. Just putting that out there. Okay. So when we look into the very deepest levels of self, we're looking at a very abstract level of self. So we have to kind of imagine, especially for those of you who haven't been with me for a little bit, that our physical body, which is up at the top of this chart right now, because the black hole is like way up there. So we're just our physical bodies up here at the top of the chart. It's very isolated in space and time. And as we go to finer, deeper levels of what we are, we find aspects of self that are less isolated in space and time, like the mind, like the heart, like my beautiful father who passed away over 10 years ago, and his love is still here, and still expanding. And so that love has transcended space and time and even his physiology, right? You can, in fact, you can think of people. Think of your ancestors. Think of the ancestors. In fact, I think that's why the ancestors come up right now, because I'm looking out into our collective and I'm just seeing a kind of a deep awakening of the ancestors. So that's very nice. When we're talking about ancestors, we're talking about the DNA, because physically in our body, that is where the ancestors reside. So any imbalances that are the byproduct of corruption in the genetics or DNA, something wrong with the DNA, this is the spot that the attention wants to flow right now in order to support healing. So we're going into what I call the Ancestral Archive. This is my favorite part of the webinars because I don't know what's going to happen next. We just get to do this together, right? It's you guys. We're doing it together. And we have such a big collective. We have such a big group tonight. Thank you all for being with me. And now we add in the ancestors. How many generations do we need to count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. About 8 generations. About 8 generations are online, are sort of awake in us right now and listening. So first flow is, there's a awareness is moving like a beam through the Hriddya Marma, through the heart chakra area and the auric field of the heart chakra area, and this whole big area of the chest and heart. And through that, the love and gratitude flowing, it's flooding into the Ancestral Archive. And it's not just individual appreciation and gratitude, which of course, naturally one would have, because we wouldn't have a physical body without them, right? So how can one not appreciate the blessings of such a vehicle? But what I'm seeing is that this flow of loving gratitude is actually coming from the Celestial Healing Collective. It's coming from that deeper level of self, not just from a sort of intellectual, oh wow, I am kind of lucky I have a human body, but from a even deeper level than that, you know, that very, very most abstract, most holistic, most complete level of creation. It's flowing, and it's interesting. It appears, by my perception, that there's a kind of a curling in that's taking place. And this is, I wanted to bring out this point anyway about the Celestial Healing Collective, that we think of infinity as either infinitely big or small or something, or somehow greater than we are or something. But outside the context of the human nervous system, which is designed to experience reality as a sequential unfoldment. When awareness gets to a deeper, more softer, more abstract or tender level, and we become unbound by the limitations of space-time, even that which is very, very great curls in and folds in upon that which is small, and even that which is very, very small can expand out and embrace that which is very great. So there's this amazing sort of tumbling that occurs at a very, very abstract or very, very deep level of self. And this is happening down at that very abstract level, that Celestial Healing Collective level. And so at that level, what I'm experiencing is that this greatest of all the great loves of the universe, the mother of creation, is so thrilled by the coordinated movement of the hearts of everyone in this healing circle right now. And the fact that the heart coordination is connecting in with the ancestors. So it's connecting in with their hearts as well. It's like, it's thrilling. It's extremely sweet. So this is opening a flow of love from a level of creation which is vast through our healing collective, our group. And I need to be very careful with my terms here, because sometimes I talk about our webinar group as a healing collective, not to be confused with the Celestial Healing Collective. So I will try to be very clear in my terms. So one of the things I'm enjoying is the effects of this flow of sweetness, gratitude, and love, which is beaming from the source of creation through our physiologies. And it acts like a kind of a food or nourishment almost. The physiology responds as if it's been fed. And the foundation of the physical body are these more abstract layers of the physiology, and that's where the feeding is coming through. So this nourishment, which is going into the physiology, is very soothing to the physiology. I see it calming down excessive excitation in the immune system. I see it softening any like little hardnesses or calcifications, such as thickening or calcifications in the circulatory system, also in the nervous system, inflammation. It's cooling down the inflammation. That feels like when I say it with my words, and understand that one of our great healing tools is our speech, because speech creates order from chaos, and we're looking at an ocean of consciousness, and how do we make order out of it? We can use our speech to define. So as I'm saying each word has an energy, resonation, or frequency. And when I said inflammation, all of a sudden that one, like it popped up to me. And I'm giving you these inner mechanics of what I'm experiencing while the healing is going on, because what I'm doing is not so unusual or impossible or separate from your capabilities, because we can all do this. So I said the word inflammation, and not that the others weren't also being blessed, but that one wants like a deeper look. So we're going to go into the inflammation. Everybody has a little bit somewhere. So what's happening right now is I'm kind of like getting reads on everybody's physiologies. And I'm seeing for a lot of people, it's not unusual to have some inflammation up in the head and neck area, head, neck, shoulders, upper chest area. We've also got people with inflammation in the extremities. And various organs. So awareness or attention is moving into the physiology with this beautiful, loving, nourishing, life renewing energy from the source of creation. And it speaks to the body at a cellular level, and also at a subcellular and molecular level, because it's going in also to the ancestors. So it's kind of working with the physiology at that very fine dimension of the physiology, if you will, that fine level. And I'm just feeling the flow of the energy going into the areas of the body that require the healing. And it seems as if a lot of forgiveness is coming with it. For the family especially. We choose our greatest lessons to be played out with those that we love the most. And the greatest lessons can also be the most uncomfortable. So when we look through 8 generations of the family, what we see is that there were so many times that individuals were working with very difficult lessons, and they were doing so with the family members and friends who they self-selected to live with and to be with in that particular lifetime, because they trust that person enough to help them learn the lesson. But then what often happens with challenging lessons that don't get completely unpacked in a lifetime, or don't get completely resolved in a lifetime, is some bitterness, resentment, like that. So those bitternesses and resentments and anger are dissolving right now with the flow of this energy from the source of creation. Inflammation is that, right? Inflammation is a physical or material expression of those denser emotions, anger, right? The immune system, it's like, oh, there's something there. I'm going to rise up and heat is there with the inflammation and so forth. So the forgiveness is good to flow, but along with it is required an expansion of understanding. And the expansion of understanding opens up to embrace the lesson so that we understand, oh, that's why I didn't get along with that family member, because there was a lesson that I was needing to learn that I wasn't completely processing. So the lessons unfurl like flowers. And they unfurl like flowers in the DNA. And as that happens, the DNA itself is able to unfurl like a flower, or like it untwists basically. And it opens up so that the enzymes that move along the DNA can repair any corruption or damage in the DNA. Beautiful. Nice job, everybody. Thank you. And then the gratitude flows. The completion of a lesson is for the sake of inner and outer growth. It is for the sake of finding a point of balance with the discord. Because when there's a symptom or suffering of any kind, that indicates that some area of self has gotten off of its balance. And I think in some traditions, right, in some Eastern traditions, balance is, the word for health is balance, right? Is that in Sanskrit or something? There's some kind of relationship with balance is understood as integral to the state of good health. Anyway. You didn't know there'd be a pop quiz, did you? Sorry. Anyway. Yeah, right. Oh, A for the day. Anyway. All right, so let's get back to that Celestial Healing Collective and see how we can even pick apart and look at our healing that we just did and analyze it from another angle so we understand how this happens. Now, this is where things get very abstract. So I'm glad we did a healing. So we have an example to sit on here. But if we go in with awareness into that very, very abstract, very subtle, prior to manifestation level of self, we find ourself. And the path is the self becoming more broad, more subtle, more refined, more all-embracing. So what this means is that at the physical level, we really can understand ourselves in terms of our individuality. But at the deeper levels of self, we can't. Because the more my being spreads out and becomes part of the collective, the more it overlaps with your being. And so there comes a point where understanding of the self is not in terms of individuality, it's in terms of the collective. So before we even get to the Celestial Healing Collective, which is a collective, we have to understand that this is our self that we're exploring here. It's a self-exploration. That's why it's completely safe. That's why it's completely valuable and useful, because knowing the self, that's why we're here, right? That's why humans exist, is so that the source of creation, the divine being, which is everything, can know itself through the vehicle of the human, through the human vehicle, through a being with a nervous system that understands reality sequentially. Because being doesn't. Being, that's what being was missing, right? It saw everything that's ever been, everything that ever will be in one shot. And so we're providing a perspective on self, which is unique and precious and wonderful and allows for the unfoldment of tremendous detail. All right, So, but we also, because what are we doing? We're providing that perspective. So also being is providing its perspective to us, or we should say our own perspective to ourselves of infinity experiencing itself in every point. Infinity is every point. Infinity is every point. Every point is infinity. It's a little bit of a broad concept, but let's see what we can do with it. And if any healings are required to support greater comprehension of that. If we experience ourselves in broader terms, and I'm just looking at basically sense of self, like identity, because this is this is the name of tonight's webinar, is an intimate relationship with your Celestial Healing Collective. We understand ourselves in terms of archetypes. That's one of the first steps. It's really common. And I think right now too, it's like as I understand, and I haven't done huge research into it because I'm busy with my own stuff, but there's a whole branch of New Age understanding workshops, programs, offerings, which play on the premise of the archetype. Like they're like goddess workshops, right? And there are oracle workshops, and right? They're warrior workshops, right? For the guys, they're warrior workshops. So all these workshops are basically aiming at what we're going to look at, what we're looking at right now, and then we're going to go even underneath that and see how the fine mechanics support that aspect, that archetypal aspect of self. So the purpose of the workshops is to create a setting which feels safe and comfortable for everyone to accept and acknowledge their own larger version of self. So they kind of get like they sync up or lock in with their own larger self, their archetypal, this archetypal form, the loving father or the protective mother or the warrior, the priest. There are all these different ones. The thing is that even in the context of archetypes, there's a kind of a separation, right? The warrior is different from the mother. Like thoughts or feelings, there's a choice there to align with these different forms of self. But it's very important to understand that the point of, I would say, maximum benefit from the experience is a point of balance where one realizes that they are the witnesser of the archetype. And that yes, to know myself as a person who was born so many years ago and this is how tall I am and this is my name, and then to also know myself as an archetype like an oracle or something, because I'm kind of being like an oracle here, right? To know both of those is being able to look at oneself as an individual and as a collective at the same time, which is valuable, but that is just a little tiny microcosm of the macrocosm, which is knowing that all of it is totality. All of it is totality. It's so easy to think of ourselves as not totality because like we're only this big, but the natural bilateral symmetry of the physiology is essentially an expression of totality. Because if we get down to our Celestial Healing Collective, which is what we're looking at now, what we see is all the laws of nature that exist in creation have a counterpart. For every law of nature that says the sky is blue, on some other planet it says the sky is orange. That's the opposite of blue. Or orange at the sunset, or whatever. For every law of nature that moves in one direction, there's a complementary law of nature that moves in the other direction, so that together the pairs create wholeness. So when we're dealing with illness or dealing with symptoms of illness, we're dealing with boundaries or limitations that have been imposed by the body upon itself in order to get our awareness to get into that spot that needs healing and really look at it, really focus in to find out what is the boundary that I'm looking at here? What is the aspect of my own enlightenment that wants to come forth? It's been building up a pressure. Something wants to burst forth. It wants to expand. Some air of consciousness wants to expand and blossom open, and it's blocked. So what is that blockage? What's causing it? And then what is the complementary law of nature to that particular little wall? It's like a little boundary in the field of the infinite ocean of consciousness. So we've got the boundary, and then we've got its complement. And when they come together, they cancel each other out. So essentially, that's what's happening in energy healing. And awareness does it because awareness contains both. It goes in and it sees, oh, wow, there's some discomfort or pain in this part of my body. And then because the witnesser is there on the pain, it can see, oh, well, you know, that's like a little part of me that feels rejected and vulnerable and delicate. And what it needs is that sense of bringing my personal power back and feeling strong and capable again. Right? Like just as an example. That's an example. So we're creating totality at every point, or we're recognizing the existence of totality at every point as it already is there. But awareness does it. Awareness does it. So down at the level before manifestation occurs, we have this quality of the laws of nature that come up in pairs. And then to create the laws of nature that come up in pairs, there are these three values. Creative impulses, dissolution impulses, and maintenance impulses, right? So we've got a kind of a three in one structure at a deeper level. That creates, that destroys, and that maintains. And within each of these structures, which, by the way, interact with each other and pour into each other and combine in different patterns to create different effects, there is totality or wholeness. And I've talked a lot of times about maintaining balance, because it's from the point of balance that one is able to recognize the subtle constituents of what percentage is creation energy, what percentage is destruction energy, and what percentage is maintenance energy. And those percentages are based on where you are in the divine dialogue. The divine dialogue is that flow from full manifest all the way down to unmanifest and back up to full manifest again, transformed. So one side is more dominated by the destructive energies, one side is more dominated by the creative energies. And the degree of success, the degree of transformation is determined by the maintenance factor, which is the balance. It is the balance. It is the balance within it. So this is coming in as a download to our whole group. And there are codes to understand concisely how to read those balances. They're codes. And the reading occurs clearly when awareness is in its balance point. So it can be in the balance point here, or here, or here, or here, or here, in the divine dialogue, in the hero's journey. Anywhere within the journey, he can maintain his stability. Okay, so here's what I'm seeing. There's an archetypal structure of self that is associated with the ability to succeed across the boundaries from one situation to another. That means to be able to succeed in maintaining optimal health, but also be able to succeed in your business, and also being able to succeed in your relationships, and also be able to succeed in your spiritual endeavors. There is a part of self that's working towards structuring a kind of overall success matrix, if you will, This is an archetypal structure of the hero, okay? But it's not just the hero. When the archetypes start to work together as a team, then the hero is also working with the wise man. And the wise man is also working with the beneficent father, the leader, like that, who are also upheld in the heart of mother. And so at a deeper level of being, deeper than the archetypes form teams. Now, all these archetypes, there are infinite numbers because each one of us understands the subtleties of our deepest levels of personality differently. So some people look at the archetypes as more angelic forms, and some people look at them more as ascended master forms, and some people look at them in other forms, all kinds of forms of creation. There's so many forms of creation, and we create them merely by attending to them, by recognizing and understanding. But what we're doing is, this is about our celestial healing collective. So we want to get to that level where the whole team is working in synchrony. That's it, synchrony. See, I said that word and it lit up. So synchrony. So I'm just taking the word synchrony and the energy frequency that goes with the word synchrony, and I'm dropping it into the field of my deepest silence, the pre-manifest level of self, where the Celestial Healing Collective is born. And I'm just asking about the quality of synchronization. And as I do that, what's coming back is a big kind of opening of awareness for everyone in the group. Everyone, we're opening. It's a download of integration for the senses of perception, so that everyone has a clearer capacity to perceive the web of life. Synchrony has to do with those moments of harmonious integration in the web of life where you think about something and then it's just there and all the pieces fall into place to lead one forward on the most perfect alignment of one's path to the highest heaven, if you will, or one's perfect path to divine embodiment. That would be another way to say it. Enlightenment. There's so many ways to describe that goal of reaching one's full potential. But it's when all the pieces work together to support that, the traversing of that path with grace. And that doesn't always mean effortless. It doesn't mean effortless necessarily, because we are not satisfied. If you want to be the winner across the whole board, of all the different areas of life, it means being comfortable or being at home. Let's say being at home with some orderliness, but also some chaos, right? Some parts of your situation you understand, you get it, it's your foundation, and this is where you're established so that you can move forward. And then there are those parts that are just like, oh, surprise, which is one reason why I love these webinars. Because, because I go into them, I have a basic idea, but it is the synchrony and the richness of our healing collective that creates a condition that I'm reading off of that condition to figure out what's the next healing and what's the next thing I'm even going to say. Like, I don't have a script. I've got a description. It's about 3 paragraphs long. That's it, folks. but it's so much more expansive and thrilling and foundational to the process of evolution to be in that space where you have enough of a solid foundation that you know where you are, but there's enough that you don't know that you have to work just a little bit to sort of like maintain that point of balance. And when you can set up that situation with your health, with your wealth, with your relationships, with your spiritual growth, then you function at an optimal position in all those areas. And it's not about comparing to the next guy. It's your optimal, whatever is your optimal. So that's what we're really setting up. So I guess I should have named the webinar something different, huh? How to function optimally or something. But how to win at all the games. Yeah, what? Yeah, I get viewers, right? I know, right? Some kind of clickbait title or something. Yeah, right from one to the next to the next. Anyway, let's go ahead and bring that back into this point. So if when we're dealing with the Celestial Healing Collective, we're dealing with basically resource, because these are the structures of consciousness which you own. And so even if you as an individual feel like, oh, I have a symptom, I don't know what it is, is it life-threatening? I don't know, I have to go to a doctor or something. Part of you doesn't know, part of you knows. There's always a part that knows. And there's always a part that knows why. Because one can just look at the symptom in its isolated form and say, I don't know, it's like my heart is acting funny. It wasn't acting like that before. I don't know why it's doing it. But there's also another part that knows, I just had a big transformation in my work and things are completely different from what we have a new boss. Things aren't at all the same in the office. It feels different. I work there for years and this new person comes in, or, you know what I'm saying? There's like, So cluing in to that part of self, accepting that I am more than my individuality. We've had this opening, and I just want to go back and check on that. This healing that sort of opens everyone's perception and makes available the web of life to support increased synchrony. And the point that doesn't necessarily mean it's easier, it just means that you function more optimally. I'm looking, something's adjusting. Hang on a second. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Some fear is clearing from the solar plexus area, and also an area that's like a gap. It's a junction between the Hriddya Marma and the Basti Mahamarma. The Hriddya Mahamarma and the Basti Mahamarma. I have to say that right. There's some fear clearing there. And that's because there's naturally a tendency to recoil from something that's new and you don't know what it is. It's a natural tendency. Establish the habit, rather than recoiling when it's new, to step back in silence and witness it. Because remember, you have attention. So rather than, and this is also for the ancestors, I can feel them online, feeling decades and decades, generations and generations of individuals feeling a little bit freaked out when things are unexpected, or they weren't, something comes up, that the unknown, when you face the unknown, heading out across the Great Plains, the great unknown, that there's a little bit of fear that I have to do something that's also maybe not completely comfortable and maybe even potentially dangerous. So there's always some danger in everything, but there's always a great reward in moving into that area of the unknown. Making sure that stabilization is also present. You have enough of a foundation of orderliness that you can keep at least a little bit of a hold, and that comes from balance. That's the maintenance energy, the balancing energy. So that's stabilizing. It's our gift back to the web of life for the increased flow of synchronicity that's coming in, is to be able to offer back gratitude, appreciation. I'm seeing in this area where the fear is clearing out, I'm seeing it replacing with a little bit of a little edge of excitement and enthusiasm and passion. And that's beautiful to have that as you're going into a little bit some unknown territory. So good, we've got that set up. It's like, it's just a this is a very slight move in the field of consciousness, in the field of self, is that slight move from feeling sort of frightened and wanting to just recoil to feeling enthusiastic, excited, and passionate about what you're doing. And with that, there was something else. I think I lost it. It'll come back. It always does. Sorry. It will come back when the moment is right. So, but there's that point of balance. It comes from the stability comes from the balance. We can't expect stability even to come from the order, because at any point, that's what it was. At any point, order can fall into chaos. That's just the way it is. And at any point, chaos can blossom forth into order. The stable point is the point of balance between them. That is stabilizing. That is our gift back to the creation, because we just received this big gift of awakening, of awareness to the sequential, the patterns. They're patterns that are continuously presenting themselves energetically to us all the time. And I don't know if you guys have ever watched one of those perpetual motion machines. They have these things with little balls. I'll see if I can find one online. I had one at one time saved, some video on YouTube saved, where there are these little balls that go back and forth like this. And they make all these different patterns. There'll be times when the balls are going together like this. And there'll be other times when they're going opposite. And then there'll be other times where they're kind of going like not opposite, but not together either. I don't know if you've seen those, but those little constructs, those little machines, give a visual representation to us of the way the waves of time flow. So there's some times where we're under the influence of more, like all the little balls are moving together like this, and everything sort of lines up. And then there are other times when they're going opposite like that. So different skill sets are required at different times. And these times, we experience them universally. We experience them as a collective. That, and I know in this Fairfield community, I'd like to share that with those of you who aren't living in Fairfield, but it's something that we've kind of gotten used to over the years, is that, you know, I would get up in the morning and I'd be like, oh, I'm not having a very good day. And then everybody I talked to, they also weren't, you know, and I had a lovely meeting with some adorable people who are with us tonight, where I was saying that the day just prior to meeting with them, there had been this roughness. We noticed roughness, and they were like, they also had the exact same, and they're like completely on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, and still we were having the same experience at the same time. And those experiences are environmental influences. So it's valuable. The reason this download that we just got from the web of life came in was because we need to be able to recognize when we're dealing with something that is more of a universal pattern that everyone's experiencing versus something that one's own individual physiology is bringing forward to be attended to. And I don't think I should have ended that sentence in a preposition, but you get the idea. So many things to think about up here. But you get the idea that sometimes a symptom comes or some experience comes, and it's really a reflection of a very personal, specific about this physiology at this lifetime and this physiology. And sometimes things come up and it's collective. In every case, the solution, the pattern for the solution is very similar. We find our point of balance. When you're facing the unknown, we step back into silence and let the witnesser predominate. Let the witnesser be the one who's observing the detail of it. From that detail, there is an aspect of the celestial healing collective, of your celestial healing collective, which is the seer. And that's when the aspects of the celestial healing collective become manifest enough that we can understand them as archetypes. You are dealing with your causal body right there. So these levels are in the field of pure transcendental unbounded awareness, and then this level here is the first finest manifest level of self. So when we experience support coming from within, which takes a form which is identifiable as an archetype, know that that is your causal body functioning. This is important to get to recognize. Like, I can look in the mirror, even when they're like 2 or 3 years old. Where's your nose? Where's your ear? You know, right? Where's your tongue? Where's your belly? You know, they were so cute. The children are so cute, right? So we've learned to recognize ourselves. We've learned to recognize who and what we are. But now what we're doing in this energy healing session is we're learning to recognize our subtle self. We're learning to recognize structures of self that we have up till now identified as part of an infinite ocean of consciousness, which seems like, it just seems like a big chaos, right? It's like the unknown, man, going into the infinite ocean of consciousness. No longer. So we're looking at the collective level, causal level of physiology, and there is the seer. You know, a lot of religions give like expression to these different, like in Hinduism, which I'm more familiar with, and so I'm no expert in religion, but in Hinduism, there's a name Shanmukha or Skanda, and that's that being that is the seer. He's the one who sees, and he's the one who sees the way perception functions. So he's the seer seeing, right? And so it's looping in on itself. So that's one name for that structure of self. So the reason I bring it up is because knowledge that's true, and this comes from my teacher, knowledge which is true must be true for all people at all times, in all places. So the reason I bring this up from this sort of ancient religion is because this archetype of the seer has been present before Jung identified archetypes, or before the Greeks identified archetypes, or, you know, it's an old thing. That level of the collective, the causal body is awakening. And when it awakens, what's happening? Here are the inside mechanics. This is what's happening. From the level of unmanifest self, a wave of awareness rises to a level of manifestation high enough that it self-identifies. That means it identifies itself in terms of its own nature. And when a wave of pure awareness comes from the field of awareness itself and identifies itself as a seer, as the one who is aware, then this is a loop. It's like a self-referral loop of consciousness, but it's moving. It moves from an unmanifest level of self to a manifest level of self, but not like necessarily we're looking at it at a deep level. It also manifests up to this level of self. And that's why we're in this together, because we're bringing I can see the healing collective is doing that. It's bringing this quality of Shanmukha, or however you want to say his name, Skanda, that's an easier way to say it, up to the level where we realize, oh, well, I am perception right now because I'm focusing my attention. My awareness is focusing right in on the process of awareness itself. And what does that do? What does it do? It creates layers and layers of its own nature. And as it does that, it becomes clearer. And this affects senses of perception. This heals. It heals the sight. It heals the ears. It heals the sense of smell and the sense of touch and the sense of taste. Which means as one recognizes this subtle archetypal form, which is birthed out of the unmanifest being, as oneself, then it means that that quality of awareness, knowing itself, is interacting with not only the five senses, but also the five, I want to say tanmatras, but I mean the five elements, such as space, air, water, fire, and earth, right? Because space, air, water, fire, and earth are associated with the senses of perception. At a deeper level, these senses have connections, they have strings, they have ties into the elements, and the elements have ties into their subtle forms. And so the subtle forms of the elements are in an interactive state with that structure of self that knows and sees. Which means, and this I infer, as I'm also experiencing it, but I'm also inferring it, is a download for the group, for our healing circle, on an enriched understanding of our relationship. And that means the physical body, physical material relationship of self with the ability to know, the ability to see, the ability to perceive. Every cell in the body is a little receptor. Every cell in the body is perceiving and knowing the whole universe from its perspective. So it's an upgrade that's going, it's like penetrating into the physicality of the body. And it's going in to every cell, and then it goes in to the subcellular and molecular levels of the body. And as it does that, the ancestors wake up again. The ancestors receive this blessing. And this is what they needed earlier, remember? The ancestors were wanting a broader perspective on their life experiences so that those points of challenge in their life would not leave them bound through karma to come back and go through again and again and again the experience. Instead, what we're doing is we're providing the means of liberation to our own ancestors to support their ability to comprehend the underlying lessons in the experiences that they had in their lifetime. And for some of them, they still might come back because they still might want to love and give and live a life that's more balanced, live a life where they can be useful, devoted players in the divine dialogue, whereby infinity knows itself through these forms, through our forms. And because our healing started in on our bodies and then spread out to our going in and going out at the same time, it spread into the fine levels of the physiology and out to the ancestors. More waves of gratitude and love are flowing. And I feel as if everyone in the group is, that the whole heart area is so beautifully open, so clear, so full, so profoundly balancing this level of openness. Okay, this is what I'm seeing. It's beautiful. This openness, when this deep, rich, like underwater river or something, some very deep, profound, flowing river of gratitude and appreciation and love to the ancestors, and from them back to you, and from you back to them, and from everybody back to the mother of creation. So it's like this big, sweet flow of being. What it's doing is it's putting the Hriddya Marma, which is the balancer of the body, into a condition that will support a greater evolution of the points which it balances. And those points are the head area and the gut area. And those, of course, obviously the head and the gut area are connected to the various, first of all, for a lot of people, areas that require healing. Second of all, it's having, what it looks like to me is it's having a kind of liberating effect on the whole body energy system. So there have been, see if I can describe this because it's rather abstract, but there seem to have been certain types of constraints on the way we think about and use our physiologies as humans, which have been useful up till now, but need to be transformed a little bit in order for us to become better vessels for divinity. So I'm going to do my best to describe how this change is occurring. Obviously, for the head area, which is oriented towards the relative, this is about increased understanding, improved perception, which we've been working on quite a bit in this webinar. We also want to do healings for the mouth and teeth for everybody has concerns in that area, who requires some support, because mouth and teeth area is where we start physically to process our relationship with the environment, right? Like when you have an apple, a beautiful flower, edible flower, and it's a wholeness in itself, but if it's edible, it goes in, and that's our, the mouth is the first place that the body interacts with that element that's going to become itself, right? The body's going to take that food and it's going to make it into its own self. So that first level of interaction in the mouth area, what I'm seeing is that initial clearing that we had earlier that affected inflammation, that initial energy that came from the source of creation, I believe, is filling up in the mouth, throat, neck area in a larger capacity than before to support a rebalancing of the microbiome of the mouth, throat area, and the teeth and the gums, and thank you, the tongue, thank you. And thank you. To eliminate those denser, their emotions get stuck. Because, you know, if the being is very, very spiritually oriented, particularly, there can almost be a feeling of, but I don't want to interact with the relative, you know, or for some people, there's a long, long history of the soul of interactions with the relative carrying a little bit of a sting to them. And that, of course, naturally happens because all interactions with the relative involve the order and chaos together, right? And hopefully, if you're balanced, they involve the order and chaos in a balanced way so that you succeed, so that you progress forward, so that immortality emerges from the interaction. But if it's not perfectly balanced, and all of us have some history of being in situations and circumstances where we were unable to find our balance point, or we didn't know that that's what we were supposed to do. And so in that condition, ended up getting stung a little bit, getting hurt a little bit. So there's some memory. It's clearing old memory patterns in the mouth and teeth and gums, tongue, throat. Even in the patterns by which we lovingly honor and accept the microbiome in the mouth, the pH balance in the mouth. That Hriddya Marma flow that has been established in the heart area is part of the energy structure which is coming up to the throat and then up into the mouth area. to create balance for the physiology. And I'm seeing people also eyes and ears too. We're getting some balance in the ears. There's a lot of forgiveness going into the ears. I think what happens is that, again, it's that little sting that comes with the out of balance condition. And then the things that one hears or sees somehow is not completely comfortable. Even the experiences of the past that were uncomfortable, that left impressions, right now impressions are clearing from eyes, ears, mouth, nose, this head area. The impressions of the past, the actual events of the past don't really change, except that they exist in different conditions in different virtual pasts. What is being balanced is one's positioning, one's self-positioning at the time that the impression was incurred, the time that the experience came in. That's where the balancing is coming. And this, again, has to do with that opening, and it's causing a greater opening of the relationship of the individual with the web of life and the synchronicity. Remember, it went down to the ancestors to help them understand the nature of their life lessons. So now this is happening for us as individuals in the context of a very, very long history of human experience. As we do this, we're healing ourselves now, right? But we're also healing the history of humanity. We heal our ancestors, we heal our past, our distant past life experiences. And it's energy healing was not understood then the way it is now. In some tribal traditions, there have been shamans and individuals who understood energy healing in various forms, but a lot of humanity didn't know it. And so there are imbalances sitting in the collective consciousness that have been there for centuries. And what we're really doing in this healing right now is we're going back and we're working with those points in the history where individuals had gotten off their balance, and as a result, taking actions and analyzing and synthesizing their experience in terms of pain instead of in terms of pieces of wholeness. Instead of analyzing it in terms of a structure whose potential is godly. I'm seeing layers and layers and layers and layers of different experiences flashing by like really fast movies or something. And there are patterns in them. Remember I was talking about the little balls with the patterns, right? And so there are patterns in them. There are patterns in them, and the patterns communicate to the mother of the universe specific forms of understanding of self. And every time a pattern occurs, every time, like this example, there's this example. In the office, there was somebody who got fired, basically. And that person left with all sorts of hard feelings. But even after they were gone, those who remain in the office feel the loss of that person. And as a response to the feeling of the loss, they analyze what exactly happened, and perhaps how could I have done something differently so that that situation didn't occur in a way that left such hard feelings. Does that make sense? The same happens if somebody dies in a tragic way, right? And that would be a more extreme example, a child or somebody. We don't want that to happen. But the point being that, everybody looks at that situation and they analyze. And the person who's gone, they're gone, man. They graduated, they liberated, they're on to their next flow, and life is good, you know, or death is good, whatever, wherever they're going, it's good, right? But everybody who's left behind has to think about that, you know, like what exactly happened, and if there was something that I can change in myself now so that we don't have a replay of that particular drama, right? So as we're looking across this really vast adjustment that's being made through the centuries and centuries of humanity and going into shift a lot of little spots in the memory banks and the impressions of humanity to allow and support people to find their balance point. Because from the point of balance, one is able to step back as the silent witness of the situation and bring in the antidote, bring in the coordinating energies that support the creation, and I would say bringing to the surface the manifestation of wholeness. It was a very big, okay, this is me doing the breakdown, the analysis. That was a very big healing. Okay, it was a very big healing that went across. Now I could count hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, tens of millions, tens of millions, hundreds, no, tens of millions, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, about 60, between 60 and 70 million people were involved in that healing. So I have to say that I was trying to navigate it with my words, right? So I was navigating, it was kind of like a really big ship that had like different parts that were sometimes moving in different directions. So it was a little bit, it had me on the edge of my seat, figuring out how can I use English to sufficiently honor that which is happening right now. And I think to sum it up in a word, that if we look through the annals of history and the great balancing that our amazingly powerful healing group was able to produce and create for these long past, still wounded feelings in the history of humanity, it boiled down to the soul of creation understanding itself in terms of patterns of behavior and experience, patterns of feeling, so that with every experience that was challenging or difficult, there was always a period of regrowth and rebuttal and I should not rebuttal, but like regrowth and renewal and regeneration that brought everyone in the collective up to a higher level. So this is for those individuals out there who went through something that was really drastic or very difficult, that going through this drastic, difficult situation is your personal offering to the collective, so that the collective positions itself in that point of dedication to the evolution of everyone. So that people as a group and us as a group also dedicate ourselves to the collective evolution of everyone. That right there explains really a lot of things that have happened in the past that were unexplainable and not just confounding, but tragically upsetting. So this is being offered by our collective to the web of life and to the lineage of ancestors and to the great collective of humanity to explain all those points that have been hitherto unexplainable and so painful. They have such a bite or a sting with them that people have difficulty going in and even explaining why it would have happened. It's too hard to even look at it. I'm letting that fall back into the field of my own silence. It's as if there was a great big puzzle of uncertainty through the field of humanity, and we were able to place in our collective at least one really solid piece that connects to many, 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 many points in the collective. I feel an incredible tenderness in the collective of our world right now, that somehow bringing this thing in and showing it from all these different perspectives, it's created a kind of a delicate feeling in the family of humanity. It's a delicacy that was not present previously. And this delicacy is intimately connected to refinement of perception and refinement of the heart and refinement of understanding. It's being received by the collective as a very subtle, tender move in the direction of divine embodiment, in the direction of living one's full potential. As I've mentioned in previous webinars, there is the sannyasi path and the householder path, and the sannyasi path is a path of renunciation. I'm just going to be in totality and wholeness by letting go of everything. And the householder path is a path of refinement, and that we find our way to the source of creation and to the embodiment of totality through ever, ever increasing purification and delicacy of impulses of self as they manifest from the source of creation through to the physiology. All right. So I'm looking at our clock. We're just past our hour. Oh my goodness. So that was a big thing that just happened. And just a little word to everyone, when we do something really big like that, it could take a little while for it to really fully sink into the collective, and for all the synchronicities that will come from it to manifest up in our world for us and for everybody else in our world. So it should be actually really sweet and fun to watch that increased delicacy and refinement become part of our reality over the next days or weeks or however long it takes. Anyway, thank you all very much for being the very source of that healing, for being the very source of evolutionary transformation for our whole world, and for blessing our world with your being, all of us. We exist. The existence itself is a blessing. So thank you for everything. I love you all dearly, and I can't wait for tomorrow to see what that brings. Okay. Should be exciting. So thanks to everybody out in video land and everybody here at home, and we'll continue on tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.